Warning, Tongue and Geek contains heavy spoilers. If you haven't read, watched, or played the content being reviewed this episode, know that we will definitely spoil major plot points. Also, this show isn't for kids. We use words like and it would take too much time and effort to edit them all out. Please don't tell our moms. This is going to be a hex of a good episode, folks. Welcome to Tongue in Geek, where two more white guys on the internet give their unrequested opinions on popular culture. I'm Isaac.
And I'm Tyler.
And today's topic is Marvel's WandaVision, streaming on Disney Plus, the first of MCU's streaming series, if you don't count all the Netflix series that they're not canon anymore, are they?
I mean, they were originally supposed to be, but, I kind of think, they softly just, it's canon, but not canon. I don't know. I don't personally care, but, yeah, I don't really think they're canon.
Yeah, Daredevil's anymore. Dead. He doesn't exist anymore. Don't worry about it. WandaVision. You want to give us a little background on the series, Tyler?
Well, like Isaac said, it is the exclusive Disney Plus MCU TV shows. I think it was a pretty interesting choice that they went with WandaVision first over maybe something more, I guess, with a bigger appeal, with bigger characters. But they went with WandaVision first, which I am totally okay with because they are the two characters, besides Bucky, ironically, who's getting more development in Falcon and Winter Soldier now, that I wanted to see more of in the films, but never got quite as much as I wanted.
Yeah, my opinion on as far as risk-taking with their properties, I think Marvel can basically do whatever since Guardians of the Galaxy succeeded. If they can make Guardians of the Galaxy a massive success, then they can make any of their properties a big success.
Yep, you're dead on with that, because, I remember, back when that was coming out in 2014, the MCU has already had, it's already cemented itself as, the next big pop culture thing. Guardians of the Galaxy was building up, and people were like, is this going to be their first flop? Is this going to be, the thing that finally makes people go, maybe the MCU isn't infallible? But no, It became, one of their biggest massive properties success of all time.
And one of their, best.
And one of their best, still,
consistently funny and, interesting premises. But back to WandaVision. This series was created by Jac Schaeffer and directed by Matt Shakman.
Matt Shakman, who...
Yeah?
Sorry to interrupt, but I think this is a really fun little Easter egg. Mm-hmm. He directed, I think, over 40 episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
So,
interestingly,
he has two amazing television shows under his belt now.
Interestingly enough, I don't really see the influence of It's Always Sunny here. I guess it might just be the Disney polish where they're like, hey, we're not going to let you put all that in there. But, I don't really see that here.
Yeah, I would be interested. I'm sure there's interviews out there that we probably could have done our due diligence to, look up and give facts out. But I want to know how the guy who directed close to 50 episodes of It's Always Sunny landed the job of directing a huge tentpole show for Disney.
Could you imagine if they got to the 2010s era episode? Because each episode's a sitcom era. If they got to the 2010s one and it was just an Always Sunny episode with Wanda and Vision, that would have been amazing.
They just had the It's Always Sunny-esque cold opening and then cut to the ironic title card.
It would have been great.
Vision, I swear, I'm not going to trap the whole town in one of my hexes. Cut, Wanda traps entire town in one of her hexes.
Yeah. So, this series is very, very, very loosely based on, as far as I can tell, two different comic series. Loosely on House of M, where Wanda, changes reality, and also... I found out that it was influenced by Tom King's run of the Vision comic.
A very, very good comic.
Yeah. I read House of M a long time ago, but I haven't read the Tom King Vision run.
You would enjoy it.
Oh, we'll check it. Well, I might look into it after this. But let's just jump right in. So, quick rundown of the series for those who haven't seen. Also, we should really throw this at the very beginning of each podcast episode. This is a spoiler review. We're always going to get really, really, really deep into spoilers. So,
yeah, and it's already ancient history as far as internet time's concerned. So if you're worried about spoilers at this point, like, why would you even be listening to a podcast about it?
The only people who wouldn't have seen this series already are people who aren't into the MCU, and those people really shouldn't watch this series because they're not going to understand anything that's going on.
I might want to get into that Marvel thing. Let's start with this WandaVision show. Yeah. What the hell is going on?
Let's start with two of like the B-list heroes that barely got any development earlier. So this series takes place, it starts off really interesting with Wanda and Vision in a small town community in like a 50s era sitcom, and it starts off with them trying to like hide the fact that Vision is a robot and Wanda has superpowers. And what's confusing is Vision's dead after the events of Endgame, or actually Infinity War, and so it starts off already very unsettling. Like, it doesn't bother telling you how they got back together, what's going on. It just starts off with this little sitcom premise of them, like, his boss comes over for dinner, and it's got some cute little charming moments like an old 50s sitcom would, but it slowly gets more and more unsettling as it goes. That's the general, I would say that's the general trend of the series up until episode 4?
Yeah, it's episode 4.
Yeah, but episode 4... Or no, at the end of episode 3, we find out that there are people trying to get into this small town where Wanda is.
Westview is the name of the town.
Yeah, in New Jersey. And in episode 4, we find out that she has actually altered reality around this entire town to be this like little small, perfect sitcom community for her. And the government, or SWORD, I think is the agency.
It's SWORD, yep. They bring in SWORD.
They bring in SWORD to try and get her to stop. And I'll say this, what I really appreciate about episode 4 is the moments where they talk about the consequences of, like, the snap. I love that they're calling it the blip.
Yeah, the blip.
It's great. Because nobody saw that hit, like, Thanos' snap, but, like...
Yeah, that's the fandom term for what it is.
It's great, but I love seeing anything that like addresses the consequences of Infinity War, because, you know, everybody, when that movie came out, everybody was like, oh, everything is going to get fixed in the next movie, it's going to retcon everything. It's like, no, there have been like long-lasting consequences for the events of Infinity War. Like, yeah, a bunch of the heroes we like are back, but like, there's a lot of stuff that's different now. What is the... Monica something is the...
Monica Rambeau.
Yeah. She is an agent of SWORD who, after have been snapped/blipped, comes back. She rejoins with SWORD under director What's-His-Face, boring evil guy. Spoiler, I guess, for the spoiler review. He's evil.
His name is Tyler.
His name's Tyler?
Yeah, his first name is Tyler. It's Tyler Haywood.
Okay. Well, Director Haywood basically sends her off to figure out what's going on in this town. She meets up with... Is it Jimmy? I'm so bad with names. The agent guy.
Jimmy Woo.
Jimmy Woo. Yeah, she meets up with him, and they start trying to figure out what the heck's going on in this small town that's been taken over by Wanda. She manages to get inside and contact Wanda, but she has all of her... memories messed with. She's like, thinks she's a sitcom person as soon as she enters, and when she comes back out, she remembers everything, and it turns out Wanda has like brainwashed this entire town into believing that they are in like this little sitcom world separated from everything else. And it's pretty dark, because there are moments where like the control slips a little bit, and you'll see like how they're like kind of still aware of everything going on underneath, and like how they're conscious of like being mind controlled. It gets pretty gruesome in some bits when you see like the cracks showing.
Let's pump the brakes on summarizing the whole thing and just kind of jump into expectations, if we had any impressions. I'd like to backtrack and say and pontificate, because I love pontificating about my own opinions.
Mm-hmm. That's how we started a podcast.
We, in private, you know, in our own conversations, have talked about it before. I was one of those guys for a while. I just kind of got burnt out on the MCU.
Yeah.
I was a fan, of course. from Iron Man onward, like, it had me, but somewhere along the line, I won't get into too much detail about it.
I know exactly where along the line. It's Civil War.
Shut up! Maybe that'll be a different podcast.
That's a different episode.
Somewhere along the line, it just kind of lost me, and, like, it just wasn't hitting for me. And I was still in it for certain movies, but, like, after a point, like, they all just kind of started to feel samey, a little rote, just... Their house style just kind of started to blend together.
Yeah.
And even for Infinity War, I was like, man, I'm kind of done. I don't care. I wish I did, but I don't. And so I didn't even see Infinity War in theaters until like weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just wasn't hyped, but like I figured I would just to do it for completionist sake. Enjoyed it okay, but didn't love it. I slowly got reeled back in with the Endgame hype. I started to get nostalgic, like, oh man, so many of the other fans have been with this since Iron Man, I'll see it to the end. And I really loved Endgame, and that kind of pulled me back, and then I really loved Far From Home. So I'm like, okay,
yeah.
They still have me.
You went back and watched a few movies, and like your opinions changed, I remember. Or am I completely wrong on that?
Really disliked Homecoming. No, you're not. We saw Homecoming together in theaters, and I didn't like it at all. I thought it was awful.
Yeah.
And because I had my mind made up, basically, which I hate doing because it makes me a hypocrite, because I always preach, like, never have preconceived notions, just give everything a chance, but I was like... And I was one of the few people that didn't like Homecoming, I didn't like Black Panther. Woo! Then I went back to watch Black Panther, and that movie deserves all the hype it got. It's fantastic.
Great. Aside from, like, a few things in the ending that kind of fell through, it is a great movie.
It is fantastic. And I really love Homecoming now, but getting it back to WandaVision, even though Endgame kind of reeled me back in, and Far From Home, which is kind of like the coda to Endgame, I still wasn't quite excited for the future of the franchise, because, like, it felt over. It felt like a huge cap-off.
That year-long break in 2020 was very much needed.
The only thing I was excited for was the prospects of Guardians 3 and Spider-Man 3. Mm-hmm. Those are the only things I was really looking forward to. And then they announced all these Disney Plus shows. And I'm just like, God, that's just too much content. It's just too much. Like, they're going to burn me out all over again. And I like a dummy, I had my preconceived notions. I'm like, they're going to be lazy, they're going to be safe. It's just a way to, keep hold of everybody's wallets and everybody's attention. The trailers for everything that they released a while back, they got my attention. I'm like, these look better than I anticipated.
Yeah.
Well, and behold, WandaVision drops. That first episode takes a chance immediately.
It's like nothing else in the MCU.
But by this point, we're 11 years into the franchise. You know, for the most part, what an MCU project is going to be. You know what it's going to feel like, look like, sound like. But aside from that one scene in the first pilot episode of WandaVision where things kind of get a little spooky, a little disconcerting, it's a straight up sitcom episode. It's an homage. It's an homage to 1950s sitcoms. And it's like, okay, they're doing something different, and you get the feeling that it's going to lead to something meaningful as it goes on. And it does. It's not just a cute gimmick for a gimmick's sake.
And even the spooky bit, like, there's not really been sort of existential cosmic horror in, I guess you could say, the snap in Infinity War where everybody dies, but that's more of like a defeat moment than it feels like a what's going on, like something very unsettling is going on with reality moment.
It's the franchise has never played with unsettling mystery before.
Yeah.
For the first half of the series, WandaVision is an unsettling mystery cloaked in this sitcom world.
Yeah. You don't see outside of the town at all until episode 4. So you have no idea what's going on around them. You just know that they're here in this little sitcom world, living their little happy lives with, like, uncomfortable cracks showing every now and then. And
yep, there's just all these little cryptic clues of, things not being right. Mm-hmm. And I think Disney was really smart in releasing it weekly instead of just dropping it at once.
Yeah.
Because because people are just so used to binging things now.
Yeah.
Like, the whole water cooler, thing of, oh, what's going to happen? What'd you think of that? Like, it had that effect, which kept the hype going.
Yeah, I'm usually for, like, having everything available all at once, but with series like this, where there's, like, an ongoing mystery to unravel, I think it definitely benefits from, like, a weekly release, because it's, like, people can build up their fan theories, people can discuss, like, all the crazy stuff they tried to catch, go back through the episode and look for little Easter eggs, try and figure out the mystery along the way. So yeah, I think the weekly release definitely worked for this series.
I'm not too plugged into fandom chatter. I glean the surface of fandom chatter. If I go too deep, I tend to get annoyed because you know how fandoms can be.
Yeah, as someone who has professionally studied fandoms academically, I can tell you that a lot of...
This is your degree. This is your profession.
Yeah, I can tell you that it gets really obnoxious really fast if you spend too much time online with fandoms.
But... Although the reception to the show at first was mostly positive, the vocal minority that was against it because it didn't give you that typical MCU experience right off the bat was loud. They're like, "What is this nonsense? Why is it in black and white? Why is it this like weird, kitschy, sitcom-y thing? Like,
where's my CGI fights?"
It threw people off for the first 3 episodes. Like, is this all it's going to be? Like, what is it doing? Why?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's not too many, like, effects, really. I mean, there are some. But, like, in the first episode, which we should also say, each episode shifts the era of sitcoms.
Yes, from decade to decade.
Yeah, so the first episode is, like, 1950s, I Love Lucy style. Then the next is, like, the 60s, and then the 70s, and so on. In the first episode, the effects are like really, really basic, like cutaway things where they'll just cut away and suddenly something will appear whenever like Wanda does her magic or something.
Like it would be in an actual 50s TV production.
Yeah, which was a brilliant way to both save money and play with the whole like time era skipping thing that they were doing. So it was very... Like, there was a lot of creativity going into this, both from, like, how are we going to save money, how are we going to do, like, a television show instead of a big-budget movie, and in, like, how are we going to build up the suspense for this.
As it went on, what kept striking me as, amazing is that there's genuine care and passion put into the story and the characters. It ties itself into the greater MCU while still telling a personal story, and none of the like references or callbacks that you expect from the franchise now, none of it feels shoehorned, none of it feels cliche, none of it feels lazy. It's so confident. It all feels organic. They bring in Darcy from the Thor movies. She's a co-lead. Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man movies. He's a co-lead. These little characters, that you enjoy in the movies when they show up, they come in and they're given like a whole new canvas to be painted on, and it just makes you appreciate it all the more.
I love the little commercials that they throw in at the main points, where like each one references some major event in like Wanda's life, and it's like showing you that like, hey, maybe she's not as stable as she's acting. The way it builds up, like there was one that was like about her accident in Sokovia where she killed a bunch of people. Except it's just like a cleaning product or something. Like it's brilliantly thrown in there, these little tributes. But I guess kind of getting back to the recap, there is a big shift both in tone and in the way the story's going at episode 4, because we finally realize what's going on outside of the town, what's kind of going on around her, and now we have this new cast of characters to follow. It's not exclusively about Wanda and Vision anymore. From what I've seen online, this is where a lot of people kind of feel the show starts to dip a bit, because they think that like they were like really invested in figuring out the mystery for themselves, and then the mystery starts, like you start seeing these other characters trying to figure out the mystery, and so they start like piecing things together for the audience. And I think this is where a lot of people are like, man, I really wanted to figure that out myself. I wanted to put these pieces together along the way instead of like kind of following other characters trying to figure out the mystery. And I think that's a totally viable opinion. I'm kind of in that camp myself. I do think the first three episodes had me hooked, and then once we had all these side characters, which I like Darcy, and I like Jimmy Woo, and I like I keep forgetting her name.
Monica.
I like all of
Monica Rambeau.
Yeah, I like all of them as side characters, starting to figure out this story and what's going on with Wanda. But I do think that there was a lot more like emotional intrigue when it was just Wanda and Vision, and you're seeing their world slowly collapse.
Yeah, I saw both reactions. The one you described and the opposite, where the people who just couldn't handle the sitcom mystery aspect of the first 3 episodes. Finally, we know what's going on. I'm into it now. I also agree with you, and then the other side. The 4th episode isn't a bad episode. It's just the exposition episode. It's all exposition.
What it does with the blip, like I said earlier, is great.
Yes, with the blip with Monica, getting back and exploring her character, who was probably the best character in Captain Marvel. That's a digression.
Yeah. So, we should throw that in there. Monica is the daughter of Captain Marvel's friend from the Captain Marvel movie, who was like her buddy in the Air Force that you meet. And that character is dead now. She died like during the time that Monica was gone. So Monica has this whole thing where not only is she trying to have to deal with like the loss of time from the blip, she's also dealing with the loss of her mother from like being gone when her mother died, which is a great little I mean I don't know if they necessarily land it, but it's a great way to immediately endear the audience to her. So, like, we have 2 reasons now to care about what's going on with her. Yeah,
she is absolutely the anchor of the outside of Westview side of the story. Mm-hmm. As fun as Darcy and Wu, people love Wu. He's a fun character. He's a likable character. But, but if it's not for the emotional investment of Monica Rambeau, the sword aspect of the story would not work nearly as well. It would
completely fall flat as generic Marvel like military trope stuff. But yeah, so there is like a big shift with episode 4 where suddenly, hey, we're getting all this exposition, figuring out what's going on, and from there it starts shifting back and forth between the stuff going on inside the town with Wanda and Vision and the stuff going on outside with the people trying to get through to Wanda, trying to get these people out of the town and like in the hex is what they call it on the town. It's interesting because you see Vision himself starting to realize the cracks in the reality, because like most of it's like for the first few episodes you're like Wanda's seeing everything and Vision's seeing it too, but Wanda seems to have some kind of like control over everyone, including Vision. But slowly Vision starts to like sort of get control of himself and fight against Wanda. And it builds like this real tension between the two of them. Even though it's been this idyllic little world for so long, which builds to a head in I think episode 5. And right when like they're about to have their huge like coming apart argument, Quicksilver of all people comes back. Except it's not MCU Quicksilver, it's the Fox universe Quicksilver from the X-Men movies, which
kinda sorta.
Well,
kinda sorta. Yeah.
That's the thing. A lot of people when they saw that, myself included, was like, "Holy shit, this is the moment that like
everybody
the MCU is bringing Fox characters in. This is going to be the gateway to bring in the X-Men characters. This is going to be crazy. I wonder how this is all going to tie together." And we'll get to this closer to the ending, but I might as well just talk about Let's just talk about Quicksilver now. It's a gag. It ends up being a gag.
Yeah, it's a gag, and pissed people off.
It really did, myself included. Because it's one thing, I get, like, not every fan theory that you have is going to come true, wish fulfillment, whatever. But, like, to throw in something that we already knew was happening, because we knew that, like, the X-Men universe is eventually going to merge into the MCU because Disney bought Fox and whatever. But now, like, they had all of that build up, like, oh my gosh, this is the moment. And it turns out that, like, he was just another mind-controlled person in the town that was being controlled by another party. And
who was also a dick joke.
Yeah, his name was Ralph Boner.
Ralph Boner.
He was just a dick. He was just a big dick joke, like, the whole way through, and it's so disappointing because there's, like, this interesting chemistry between him and Wanda, especially in the Halloween episode, where, like, he's, like, telling her, yeah, this is great, I like what you're doing here, like, I love he's, like, aware that it's all fake, and at first you're kind of like, how does he know? Like, what is he, like, having memories from his existence kind of bleeding through? Like, what's going on? But it just turns out he was under somebody else's control the whole time, so that was big. Quicksilver was a big letdown. I really was hoping that we would get him in the MCU, because he's such a fun character in the X-Men movies. Like,
he's a highlight of those later movies.
The Quicksilver scenes are amazing, like, both visually and just him as a fun, like, I don't give a crap character who's just kind of like, yeah, I might help sometimes, but whatever, I'm in, I'm out.
It's weird, because I feel like it should bother me more than it does, because I've been annoyed at similar just gags like that in past MCU movies and projects. But, like, when I think about it, it does kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of a letdown. But I think at that point in the series, I was so invested in the actual story, and Wanda as a character and what was going to happen, that him not being Quicksilver and just being a dick joke was more of like a, oh, okay, well, whatever, and then I got over it.
Yeah. I was just disappointed because, like, we don't know how they're going to bring the X-Men and stuff, all their Fox properties, into the MCU. And I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about the X-Men movies. I personally think they're a mixed bag. But there's a lot of good stuff, especially lore, like, world building, that the X-Men universe has done that I think would be great to see in the MCU. And it's kind of disheartening to see them just kind of kind of just play that up for laughs, like, oh, is this gonna, oh, no, it's not, haha, see you later.
Yeah, the thought process behind it is kind of weird. I don't want to get hung up on just this one aspect too much, because there's so much to talk about with the show. I love to like most of the Fox X-Men movies. I think when they're on, they're as good or better than the MCU's best.
Logan's a masterpiece.
Logan, Days of Futures Past, First Class.
Deadpool 1 and 2 are also funnier than any MCU movie. I'm sorry.
X2 and Days of Futures Past are still some of the best superhero movies ever, in my opinion. But anyway, the cast of the, I would have loved it if the cast of the recent X-Men trilogy, First Class, Days of Futures Past, Apocalypse, it's a quadruple trilogy with Dark Phoenix. I forgot all about Dark Phoenix.
Everybody forgot about Dark Phoenix.
I would have loved it if they would have found a way to fold that cast, who's, like, still young, fit the parts well, if they could have found a way to fold that into the MCU, but I guess that's not happening. Oh well. Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Moving on. Let's move on to the next part.
Let's talk about the meaning, the themes, the symbolism of the show.
So, quick rundown. One last thing to note in the story. Wanda is doing all this. Wanda is the reason that town is messed up. She's brainwashed everybody, and basically rewrote reality in order to have this whole town just be the way she wants it, this idyllic little world. Wanda's doing all this. So, in a way, she's the villain of the series for, like, the first half.
First half, she is the villain, essentially.
Which was brilliant, I thought. I know that we had a little back and forth talking about, like, whether or not she would stay the villain, if there was another force at play. I really wanted her to stay the villain the whole way through. I wanted this to just be Wanda, because, like, the whole thing is that she's, like, dealing with her grief of losing vision, of, like, having messed up so many times in the past with, like, accidentally killing those people in Sokovia and like then dying during Infinity War and coming back 5 years later, missing that big time gap. Like, I really wanted her to be the main bad guy and for them to have to like get through to her. And we'll get to this a little further on. There's another influence, but she is responsible for making that whole world.
I understand wanting that narrative risk of keeping her the villain longer, but I think that would have been a little bit too unfair to her character, because ever since House of M, she's just been kind of juggled as this, like, you know, oh, she's crazy and she can't control herself, and they kind of haven't known what to do with her. Mm-hmm. And even though she's the inciting incident in House of M, it's not really about her, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
So this kind of feels like House of M, but done justice to her character.
Right.
So I am very much glad that she wasn't the villain the whole time, because the goal of the show, as has been discussed by its fans, people who analyze it and stuff, is that it's a look at trauma. It's the Marvel version of somebody dealing with their grief and trauma.
Oh, absolutely.
When you think about it, even though she's only been a side character in the MCU until the show, she has one of the most, you know, fucked up and tragic backstories of any of the characters so far.
Not even just backstories, just throughout the movies. Like, yeah, backstory-wise, she was like, she had that moment in, like, Age of Ultron where we learned that, like, one of Tony Stark's missiles killed her family and she was left alone with it for days. But, like, even during the movies that we've seen, like, her accidentally killing the Sokovians in Civil War sets off the Civil War, which then sets off, like, the next 5 movies of the MCU, and, like, how everybody's, like, torn apart and no longer together. Like, she did that. And then, and then Vision dies, and she, like, fails to save him, and then his death was for nothing because Thanos, like, brings him back and takes the stone anyway. So, like, she has gone through so much shit, which is kind of what I was hoping to see. I was wanting to, like, I know, like, I know this series is about trauma, and this series is about, like, learning to come to terms with it and, like, all the unhealthy ways of coping. But, like, I really wanted to see that, like, pushed to its limits, because I wanted her to eventually come back around. I wanted her to, like, have her redeeming moment and everything, but I didn't want there to be, like, any other influence on her. I wanted this to, like, all be herself, just her doing this to this town to try and cope with her loss. And to an extent, it is. Yeah. But there is an outside influence, and we'll talk about her in a second, but there is an outside influence that in the last few episodes steals what I feel like the emotional weight of, like, here is this character who has gone through so much and is finally broken, and we have to find a way to piece her back together.
As far as it being a look at Wanda's trauma, and I'm not saying this in a braggadocious way, but I called from pretty early on that she's doing, you know, sitcom hexes because, you know, in Sokovia that's what she would watch with her family and her brother. I bet that's what it is. Mm-hmm. And lo and behold, I think it's the penultimate episode, where we get her extended sort of backstory. You know, she's in Sokovia with her family. It's a war-torn nation. Her dad comes in with a briefcase full of, you know, they're not bootlegs, but they're black market, you know, DVDs of old, you know, American television shows from 50s, 60s, 70s, and onward. And, like, it was her one solace, you know, her one comfort from all the horror that was happening outside of her home.
Yeah.
I think there's something to be said about sort of the hollowness of nostalgia.
Yeah, that sort of, like, hollow escapism.
Mm-hmm. Because so much of, you know, because I've seen a lot of the shows that WandaVision was referencing. I'm no expert on 50s and 60s sitcoms, but I've seen your I Love Lucy's, your Honeymooners,
Malcolm in the Middle,
that kind of stuff.
I love the Malcolm in the Middle era.
Mm-hmm. And as good as those shows are, they paint a reality of the time period that isn't the truth. Mm-hmm. You know, it's definitely a rose-tinted version of the 50s, the 60s, you know.
Absolutely.
Of course they don't touch upon, you know, the 50s still had Jim Crow, you know. we didn't have, that wasn't lifted until the late 60s. So it's only fitting that the hollowness of those shows that she loves so much is what she puts into her hexes. It's a facade, just like those shows are, in a way.
Yeah.
And she doesn't realize it, or if she does, she doesn't want to acknowledge it because her life has been such hell for so long that she just wants to feel like it's all going to be okay. And the only way she knows how to make it okay is to go back to the only happy moments in her life before...
Which was an illusion. It was always
which was an illusion.
Yeah.
Before the Stark bomb came and blew up her world, literally. Which, God, it's digression, but it's insane how much Tony has screwed over the world of the MCU. Love the guy. He's a hero. He saved the entire universe. But, man, Tony, like...
We can do a whole episode on Tony Stark's character arc across the MCU, because that is just a fascinating...
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
It is a fascinating, arc, because people are always talking about Tony Stark, and they're like, oh, he's the same character, he keeps making the same mistakes and everything. It's like, if you pay close
Which is what I've said in the past.
You have. But if you pay close attention, Tony Stark is going through some deep, deep changes, and it's cyclical, but it's in a cyclical way that moves. Almost like, I would compare it to the way a planet orbits a sun, but a sun also orbits something else. He is going in a cyclical pattern, but moving forward in a way, and it's very interesting. But to bring it back to WandaVision, we've danced around it for too long. We need to address there is an outside influence and an ultimate villain.
It was Agatha all along.
It was Agatha all along. So the little comic relief character goes by Agnes, she turns out to be the
sorry to interrupt you, played by one of my favorite character actors recent.
Mm-hmm.
Her name is Catherine Hahn. I love her to death. She's awesome in everything she does.
Oh, she was great.
She is the villain. Go ahead. Go on.
Yeah, she turns out to be the villain. It turns out that even though Wanda made this whole world the way it was, Agatha has been doing stuff. She's a witch who has been doing little interventions to make sure that the world stays the way it is, because she's trying to figure out how Wanda got so powerful. So, she kills their dog at one point to, really mess up Wanda's, make Wanda more pissed at, the military guys outside the barrier. She just does little interventions the whole way through that, make things... exacerbates Wanda's grief and makes her want to hold on to this world even harder. Agatha's an interesting character. She does a great job as the comic relief up until that point, and when she's revealed as the villain, even though I wanted Wanda to be the main thing through this whole way, I thought it was really interesting for the MCU to bring in full-blown magic in the way that it's done, because
it just kind of went for it.
Doctor Strange sort of touches on magic in a weird way. It's interesting how Doctor Strange does it. We can talk about that later, but...
As a quick comparison, the Doctor so far with the one solo movie that we've had so far with him, that magic is portrayed in a more mystic sort of way.
There's not a system so much as just
it's more cosmic and ethereal.
Yeah, sort of.
While the Wanda and Agnes magic is kind of your
the Western fantasy idea.
Yeah.
She even starts mentioning schools of magic, evocation and illusion and necromancy, and it's the first time in the MCU where we've gotten this full blown this is a full blown fantasy character who has magical powers that aren't covered by some pseudoscience BS or... Yeah,
they tried to burn her in Salem. That's how witchy they get with it.
Yeah. She's
they're actual witches.
Yeah, and she's got a bootleg version of the Necronomicon that she uses and everything.
The Darkhold.
The Darkhold.
Yeah, which is another thing we could digress on, but I won't because we're on a good tangent here.
We won't yet.
The Darkhold is also part of Marvel lore. I don't know too much about it, but
okay,
I do know that.
We are doing the tangent then, so go ahead.
But no, I'm just saying that like there's a lot of great lore for those who want to like dig into it, because like pretty much everything in the show is pulled from the source material in some way.
I looked up Agatha. She was like a servant of Mephisto or something.
Yeah, and she kind of had a hand in raising Wanda for a long time in her adolescence and helping her control her chaos magic, which is what she's after in WandaVision. Agatha is after Wanda's chaos magic. She wants to know how she has it, why she's so powerful with it.
Turns out Wanda is an ancient prophecy called the Scarlet Witch, which is her character name in the comics, and the first time it's actually referenced here, right?
Yeah, which I guess I never realized.
Yeah, they never call her by her hero name in any of the movies. She's just Wanda.
So yeah, when that happened and she gets her comic accurate costume, it's like a oh hell yeah.
It is a little bit of a hell yeah moment, because I'm always forgetting like more comic accurate costumes in these movies. They like to kind of, well, no, the MCU's actually been pretty good about not toning them down too much. The X-Men movies really toned down like character costumes and stuff. But like,
I'm forever going to be salty that we've never really gotten Thor in his helmet.
Yeah,
like. You see it briefly in the first movie, in the very beginning, and then he kind of sort of has a variation of it in Ragnarok.
We'll get to that one.
Worst MCU movie. We'll get to that one and completely obliterate any fan base we might have built up by that point.
Don't worry. Listen, from what I've seen on the internet, people are very rational and like it when you explain your points clearly and with passion and eloquently, and they never, ever get mad at people who disagree with them.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very, level-headed place, the internet.
The internet is a utopia. But anyway, Agatha.
Yeah, Agatha. All along.
I even though I didn't want another villain, I think Agatha works for a secondary villain here, for a last-minute throw-in twist villain. Like I said, she's very funny throughout the first part of the series, and to have like a comic relief turn villain, even though I know that trope's been done, it's not one that I'm terribly used to, where like somebody who's just kind of like, oh, they're just here for laughs, suddenly turns out to be like a much more serious element than you expected. So
it takes a lot of talent to pull that off, to switch her off. And they do. It
worked. I did not see Agatha being the villain until like it actually happened. I did not see it coming. When she becomes the villain, she kind of becomes an exposition fest. Unfortunately,
it's but like it's kind of necessary with these kind of narratives,
It is, but they throw in a lot of stuff in the penultimate episode of like, here's how magic works, and also we're going to go back through your childhood and stuff. And the childhood, I love the extended backstory that we get with Wanda, but
some of the most emotional stuff of the show is that stuff.
But Agatha is really only there as a sort of guide through that, so she doesn't really get a good... Like, her whole motivation is just to get power for power's sake. Like, we get little hints that maybe she wants more than that, like she might have a deeper motivation, but, like, for the most part, it's, I want power for power's sake. I want to have the chaos magic of the Scarlet Witch. Like, she's kind of just generic, oh, I'm a bad guy because I am a bad guy.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I guess like I was just so invested in the emotional aspect of the story. Yeah, that's another thing I didn't realize, is that her motivation is kind of the cliche, I want power to have the power. But it works for me because, for one, she's a very fun character, played by a great actress.
Yeah.
And everybody knows the meme. It's not really a meme, it's just a criticism. Everybody knows the criticism by now that the MCU tends to not have the greatest villains.
Yeah.
But she works because she's acted well, and she's a good foil mentally and physically for Wanda. And when she does her turn, she's intimidating. Like, you get the sense that she could wreck shit up.
You get the sense that even though she's not as powerful as Wanda, she's much, much smarter. Like, she actually knows what she's doing, whereas you find out that Wanda is basically an uber-powered noob who's been, like, playing on God mode this whole time. So, it's really interesting to see how they kind of, like, in their battle, how it kind of plays out, because you have Wanda kind of throwing around these big power moves, but Agatha actually knows what she's doing with her power, so she's...
Yeah, she's much more concise. Yeah. She knows where to hit, how to hit, while Wanda's just kind of, like...
Yeah, and I'll say this, and this is a good transition, she makes a much better villain than generic sword director, whose name I already forgot again.
Hayward.
Hayward. Okay, yeah, let's talk about Hayward for a second. His whole...
Why? Well, no, he's important to the plot. He is
important to the plot. Here's the thing. Hayward and Sword had Vision's body. Vision was dead, they had the body, and they were basically trying to rebuild him. Wanda came in prior to the series. We find this out in the penultimate episode. She came in prior to the series and wanted Vision to bury so that she could have closure. Hayward basically says, no, you can't do that. He's ours. We're gonna, like, learn all we can from the body. And
he's not a life, he's property, you know,
generic.
The spiel they give you every time an artificial intelligence has a mind of its own.
He's the basic evil army general, where it's like, I have to get as much power for the U.S. government that I can, and it's like, that's all he's up to. So, after that, Wanda actually leaves without taking Vision, which I thought was really interesting, that, like, because, like, the whole way it's played up early on, you think, oh, she stole Vision's body and then used it to bring him back to life, but turns out she left the body there, and she recreated Vision from her memories and stuff, which means the real Vision is out there, and using part of the Hex or something, I don't really remember, they use part of the Hex, the Hayward guy uses it to recreate Vision. They bring him back as, like, this all-white version of Vision, except with none of his memories, and he's basically just a killing machine for the military.
Yeah, just a weapon. He's the weapon version of Vision.
That they wanted.
None of the...
Yeah. So, final episode, which this is the big ending that a lot of people have strong opinions on. We end up having Agatha versus Wanda, and Agatha has Wanda's kids, who... we didn't talk about the kids at all, did we?
We didn't.
We need to talk about the kids real quick. So Wanda creates her own kids. It was very...
Which also happens in the comics.
Yeah, it was very...
And because comics, it's incredibly convoluted, so... Yeah.
It was really...
That's a whole episode in and of itself.
It was really weird, because, like, she's suddenly pregnant in one episode, and then she just suddenly jumps through her pregnancy. Like, she gives birth to them, like, the next episode, even though it's been, like, a day in universe. And then, like, she, like, jumps up the kids' ages. And the whole time, I was like, okay, there are all these people who are brainwashed who are real people. Is she, like, just switching these kids out with other people's kids the whole time?
Oh, God, I didn't even think of that.
That was where my brain was going, is, like, every time she wanted the kids to be older or something, she'd just switch them out with a different pair of kids or something. And I was like, God, this is so dark. It turns out she just made them, the same way that she just made a new Vision. And these kids end up having powers. One of them has his Uncle Quicksilver's powers, super speed, and then one of them has sort of like Wanda's powers.
Yeah, kind of hexy, sort of nebulous magic power.
Which, we're pretty sure, I mean, has it been officially confirmed, or is everybody just like, yeah, we know that these two characters are Wiccan and, what's the other one called?
Is it Speed? Is it something generic like that?
Speedy Boy! Speedy Gonzalez! Yeah, but there are two characters from the Young Avengers series. Yeah, which is getting its own series.
Yeah, it's Speed. His name is Speed.
Yeah. So
it hasn't been confirmed yet that they're doing it, but I mean, you don't introduce Wiccan and Speed in such a substantial role and not have plans to, you know. And they're introducing Kate Bishop in the new Hawkeye show that's coming out. Mm-hmm. So I definitely think they're building toward a new / Young Avengers roster.
We've already got
the next decade or so.
Yeah, we've already got Skrulls, so Hulkling's probably going to be a thing too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she basically makes these kids, and it turns out during the final episode, during the final fight, Agatha basically calls out Wanda and is like, hey, I didn't do this to all these people. That's on you. And Wanda's like, oh crap, I've really messed these people up. There's this really, like, upsetting scene where I think Agatha releases the control Wanda has over a bunch of the people in town, and they just run up to Wanda, and they don't, like, fight her because they're, like, too scared to fight her, but they're all just, like, begging her to release the town and, like, free them, and they're like, I haven't seen my son in days, and, like, I just want to go home, and stuff like that, and it's really gut-wrenching.
Yeah, like, she doesn't, like, the people, they're still there, they're not, like, written out, the magic doesn't, like, wipe them out, like, memory-wise. They're still buried there,
yeah,
trapped, imprisoned in the characters she creates for them.
It's really dark. It's like,
yeah,
the more
she screws over this town mighty hard.
And these characters, she finally decides to free them, even though this whole time she's been, like, controlling them. But she finds out that if she releases the hex, then Vision and her kids, who she created out of nothing, will disappear. So that's the big dilemma in the final episode, is like, I have to keep the hex up or else my family will die again. Which is a great motivation, because now she's torn between, I know what I'm doing's wrong, but also I can't keep doing this. I can't maintain the illusion anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it kind of gets buried under another CGI hero fight between Agatha and Wanda. They kind of fly around and throw magic at each other. I will say, what I really loved from the final episode was the Vision and Vision debate.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm always a fan with the MCU when they do unorthodox climaxes between, like, a hero and an antagonist. Like they did in Doctor Strange. I really like how, instead of, like, him just beating up Dormammu or whatever, he just, like, uses a time stone to basically annoy Dormammu to death over and over and over again, stick him in a time loop. Here, the created Vision and the original Vision, who's had his memory wiped, have a discussion about which one of them is the real Vision and what it means to exist, which we haven't talked too much about actually Vision's arc throughout all of this.
Yeah, I figured we'd get into that once we got to, Hex Vision and Sword Vision.
So Wanda's whole arc throughout the series is about grief and coming to terms with it and trying to escape it and all the, like, bad coping mechanisms she has. Vision's arc through this is like, I don't even really know how to describe. How would you describe it?
For the first half of the show, he's kind of passive. Because, he's created from her memories, but he gathers enough autonomy. I guess it's never really explicitly explained. I guess he's created from, because they love each other and she loves him so much, his hex, because he's a hex, he's a living hex. I guess it's so well recreated that he just kind of has the wherewithal to be more observant than everybody else and see through the cracks and notice that something's not right and that she might be doing something wrong. And then I can't remember if, like, she lets it slip that he was dead, or if does he remember that? God, we should probably have the details more clear before we talk about it.
It's been a couple weeks.
But
I think he finds it out on his own. I think he talks to Agnes, actually.
That's right. Yeah.
Agnes tells him, because he releases her, even though she was technically free the whole time. Vision apparently has the power to, like, release the hold Wanda has on everybody. And he talks to Agnes, and she tells him he died. So this Vision is now trying to figure out, like, he doesn't remember the Avengers. He doesn't remember his life. He just remembers being with Wanda. So it was like the idyllic version of, not Vision, but the idyllic version of the life that Wanda wanted to have with Vision the whole time. So there's this arc of, like, Vision figuring out that his life is too perfect and that people are suffering because of it. Like, it's such an interesting arc, because he basically has to realize that not only does he have to give up his perfect life, but he also has to confront the person he loves most to make them give up their perfect life.
Mm-hmm. And also basically die again.
Yeah, he's definitely, like, the moral core of this show. Like, he's the one who wants everything to, like, go right. Like, he's like, I know what's going on now, and I can't blind myself to it anymore. We have to fix this, even if it means that we lose everything again. Which is great, and I think his final debate with the original Vision is really interesting, and I'm interested to see how they bring the original Vision back, because he, like, flies off, and we don't really know what happens to him.
Because Hex Vision gives him the memories, gives the actual Vision body that Sword recreated the memories, and it's the whole thing of, like, what makes life, what is a person, what is a living thing, what is a being, like, is it flesh and blood, is it memories, like...
The whole Ship of Theseus thing, which they talk about.
Yeah, like, if something rots away and, like, is rebuilt plank by plank, is it still the same thing?
And I'm trying to remember this right. I really should have rewatched this scene before we did this podcast, but I think the conclusion that the Hex Vision comes to, basically, is that the Ship of Theseus, to follow the metaphor, is an idea. It's like a continuation of an idea. It's not the pieces it's made of. It's not the work that went into it. It's the idea of the Ship of Theseus. What you believe the Ship of Theseus is the Ship of Theseus. And that's basically like, if you believe that you are Vision, if you believe that you are real, then you can be real again. Which is a very...
Yeah, I can get behind that.
A very interesting sort of point to take, because this whole series is about how believing in something that isn't real is like an escape, is like a coping mechanism that Wanda uses to deal with her grief. But here we see the opposite side of it. We see how Vision believing in something being real is a positive thing. It's something that he uses to confirm his identity and like help the original quote-unquote Vision sort of regain himself, even if for just a moment. So I thought it was really interesting that they brought in this other side, like that kind of counters the whole thematic messages.
Yeah, it's definitely a yin and yang.
Yeah.
Where, you know, Wanda uses her powers to stamp down and, you know, blind people and entrap them. Vision uses his to help somebody and set somebody free.
Yeah. It's a really interesting moment. Big CGI fight between Wanda and Agatha. The sword guys come in, but nobody cares about the sword guys.
Yeah.
The kids beat them up, I think.
They did, yes.
Yeah.
Which, you know, fan service, you know, because they are superheroes in the Marvel Universe in their own right.
Yeah.
You know, priming us for the inevitable Young Avengers movie or TV show that is coming.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the big CGI fight. I know that's kind of a thing with comic book movie fans now, is that because we've been so inundated with all of these movies for so long now, like, people get kind of burnt out on they're flying around again, they're hitting each other again. But it depends on the execution, of course, but, like, I'm always like, yeah, but, like, it's comics, you know? Like,
yeah, but
that's what comics is. So, you kind of, like... You need your big CGI fights because you can't represent the comics today as you read them without CGI, for one thing. And you want to see the costumes and the capes, you know, flying at each other.
Right, and that's great, but I feel like this fight in particular is very lackluster because they've established magic as something that they can do. And there are moments where they do some very interesting things with it. But in the final moments, especially, it basically boils down to them just throwing bolts of energy at each other. Like, Wanda throws red bolts, and Agatha throws purple bolts, and they just kind of throw those back and forth at each other while they're waving their hands around in a big CGI scape, and it's like...
Oh, well, wait a second, though. She does kind of pull a Doctor Strange switcheroony. Remember when... How does it go? Agnes establishes that, like... When there's runes around, like...
Yeah, no, I was gonna get to that part, yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, well, go ahead.
But she actually beats her because Agatha earlier used a bunch of these runes, and she explains that if you have a room set up with all these runes, then only the witch who made them can use magic there. And that ends up being how Wanda beats her, which is creative, but visually up until that point, it's basically them just throwing energy bolts at each other.
Yeah, fair enough, but...
Yeah, I think it's a very creative, way for her to beat Agatha. I just wish that they had visually made it more interesting, because they're literally just flying around in the air, throwing bolts of energy at each other until finally the runes kick in, so...
Yeah, fair enough, I can see that. It's not a particularly visually interesting or unique fight until Wanda pulls the, oh look, you're in my house, and there's runes, you can't do shit trick.
Yeah. And I feel like...
But, it's kind of like I still enjoyed it, even though it's mostly just, the two things hitting each other finale.
I feel like, especially with Agatha, though, they suddenly establish, oh, here's magic, and here's all these ways that magic can be used. I feel like I really wanted to see more of Agatha just going all out, turn into a swarm of bats, or, bring some skeletons out of the ground, just do all kinds of crazy witch shit. And that
would have been cool.
It would have been really cool to see her counter Wanda's raw power with all this variety of magic, and we get glimpses of that. They do little bits of that.
Get trippy with it.
Yeah, like Doctor Strange does. That movie. For what its plot is kind of generic and repetitive. That movie got
it's
real
just Iron
trippy.
Man with magic.
Yeah, but that movie gets real trippy with its visual effects and stuff. And I wanted some of that, but with some more Western magic kind of stuff that they had set up there. So
I hate the term missed opportunity, because it's kind of meaningless.
Yeah,
but I guess it could be kind of a missed opportunity in that Agnes didn't get to display more creativity with her powers, because when we have her flashback when she's burning at the stake, and then she turns the power back on the people that are burning her, that's some pretty dark stuff for the MCU.
Yeah, they get the life sucked out of them.
Yeah, they basically turn into zombies, and that's cool. That would have been cool if she kind of did more stuff like that.
Zombified the townspeople or something. Yeah, do some crazy stuff.
Just use Wanda's psyche against her more, kind of like Mysterio did in Far From Home.
Yeah.
Something like that.
But, anyway, big fight finishes, Wanda wins. Wanda does a really dark move and, forces Agatha to think she's Agnes again. It's pretty freaking bleak, actually. She just full-on turns Agatha into Agnes, she brainwashes her, and that's, her final fate, is to think that she's Agnes forever with no powers or whatever. Which is pretty messed up, because as we've established, underneath that, she's still aware of everything going on. But then she finally brings down the Hex, and there's a very touching and sad moment where she loses her family. We see the whole Hex come down slowly, and the kids disappear, and she and Vision have one last talk, and he disappears, and then Wanda goes off on her own to kind of figure out how magic works. Last we see her, she's doing an Incredible Hulk in the wilderness, in a cabin, just kind of surviving on her own, trying to figure out how her powers work, on the run from the government, because she's still literally kidnapped the town, and she can't go back.
Essentially tortured a town.
Yeah. But yeah, that basically wraps up the series. And there's hints of other things in the finale too.
Yeah, of course it's Marvel. They drop hints and threads for everything under the sun.
Yeah, Monica gets powers halfway through the series, and she
because going in and out of the Hex so many times alters her physical makeup on a molecular level. So Monica Rambeau is now a superhero. She hasn't coined a moniker yet or really got to use her powers much, but we will be seeing more of her.
It's Photon in the comics, right? Photon?
Yeah, I don't know what she goes by right now, but she was Captain Marvel for a time, and then she turned into Photon. I think she also went by something, she went by Pulsar.
Okay.
She's one of those characters that just has gone through reinvention after reinvention.
Yeah.
I assume they're going to give her the name of Photon.
Okay.
I was just going to say, which I'm excited about, because she's a standout character in the show, and very likable character, very interesting character, and I'm very excited to see more.
If anything, this is, well, I don't know. I don't know if this is really a criticism or not. I would have liked to have seen more of her, because she has a very interesting arc with, like, dealing with her mother's death and everything, and the blip and all that. And also, she's, like, the only person outside of the Hex that recognizes, like, what Wanda's going through, all the pain that she's going through, and having to deal with that. But I really would have liked to have seen more of her just develop a little bit more. But the show was focused on Wanda, which is, it should have been. It needed to be.
It's called WandaVision.
It's about them. It needed to be focused on them, and it was. So that's good. I hope we just get a little bit more of her, a little more developed for her for future series or whatever.
Well, we will, because there's that stinger where was it one of the Sword characters who reveals themselves to be a Skrull?
Yeah, I think so.
Because they're making Secret Wars as well with Fury. Nick Fury is going to be the main character in Secret Wars. So I'm assuming that Nick Fury is going to head up the, sort of the team.
How are they going to do Secret Wars? Because in Secret Wars, the Skrulls are the bad guys. And the MCU is very clearly established the Skrulls are like a group of refugees hiding. Like, maybe
it'll be like a faction of Skrulls.
Yeah, I don't know. But
yeah, I know Monica is definitely going to be in Secret Wars with Nick Fury.
And Captain Marvel too, and whatever.
Do you think they'll have Captain Marvel in Secret Wars? Because it's going to be a show, it's not going to be a movie.
No, I meant she'll also be in Captain Marvel 2.
Yeah. Not Captain Marvel as well.
No, I didn't mean also Captain Marvel. So,
before we talk about what it sets up, I want to talk about Wanda's ending a little bit more.
Yeah.
I read most people enjoyed the final episode, some people didn't like it. I saw a lot of people say that they thought Wanda got off too easy for what she did. Mm-hmm. And I don't see it that way, because the Hex drops, the people beg and plead for her to make it stop, to give them their lives back. She sees what she's done, and then once it's dropped completely, she's completely ostracized. They look at her like she's this evil monster. She has nowhere to go. She has no family. She doesn't have anything but her magic.
She's basically like Bruce Banner was, and she's like out and alone in the woods. Like,
I don't know what more people wanted as penance, I think being on the run without a soul in her life is a pretty good sort of place to leave her.
I think it was less about where she ends up as a character, and maybe more about, like, especially with, like, Monica, the way that, like, Monica sort of portrays Wanda's trauma and everything. Like, Monica is very much somebody who's like, I understand the pain that you've gone through, and that's part of her character. I think it absolutely works, because Monica has also gone through all this heavy loss and all of this sudden upheaval after having, like, been disappeared for 5 years. But I think a lot of people, like, think that Monica maybe let her off a little too easy, because it's like Monica's like, oh yeah, you're gonna be on the run now, but I believe in you. I believe you're a good person or whatever. And it's like, she's still tortured a whole town of people. You're kind of cutting her a lot of slack here. I think it's less about, like, how she actually ends up narratively, and more like maybe the way that the show is, like, portraying her as she gets off. Like, oh, you should you should feel more sympathetic for her, even though she literally tortured a town of people.
I mean, that's just kind of how redemption in fantastical fiction works.
Yeah.
I mean, morality has to be romanticized and stretched in these kinds of stories. Mm-hmm. Like you can't say in real life, because it's not real life. Like, we don't have all-powerful witches in real life who trap towns to deal with their trauma.
Yeah.
Like in the narrative itself, we know that at heart Wanda is a good person. We know that deep down she really doesn't want to hurt people.
We are going to get into our Civil War argument again if we keep pushing this about whether or not intention matters versus the pragmatic ethics of.
I know, but I mean, like,
people.
If we can redeem Tony Stark, we can redeem Wanda.
Absolutely.
So I don't think there's an issue with how she was left off or treated by Monica at all. Personally,
I just understand where people are coming from because. As I've kind of hinted at, during the Civil War, we had a very strong argument on this versus of whether or not a character is intentionally good versus the pragmatic ethics of allowing a character to continue doing what they're doing when it causes so much negative consequence. And I think that's where a lot of people are sort of falling on the other side, is like, she kind of gets away. Even though she's now alone on her own, it's not so much that we're worried about that. It's the fact that she is alone out there and still has the power to do this to other people. She's still technically a threat, and like.
But that's the case with any superhero, though. You know. Yeah.
And that was kind of the point of Civil War, but we're dipping too much into that. Let's get to let's talk about sort of some final thoughts on the series in general.
I probably said it in the beginning. I don't remember if I did, but WandaVision, hook, line, and sinker, pulled me right back into the MCU when I wasn't feeling it.
If every Disney Plus series takes as many risks as this one does, I will be absolutely happy, even if some of them are flops. Because this one does not feel... Like, maybe the last couple episodes, it starts to feel a bit like a generic Marvel movie where it's got, like, here's the generic bad guy, and we're going to have a generic bad guy fight. But, like, the majority of the series is new. It's refreshing. It's not all just, we're going to go fight these people. It's like, hey, what's going on? We've got this mystery. We've got some real sort of existential dread going on. Like, it's very different from anything the MCU's put out so far.
Yeah, the emotional stakes of the show are some of the realest and most investing and strongest of the entire franchise.
It's very character grounded, which is great.
And it has a few hiccups along the way, but for the most part, I think it's a brilliant show. It's probably my favorite MCU thing since Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I guess that's a semi-divisive take because most people love Guardians 2, but some people really hate it.
Yeah.
But I love it to death.
We should talk about Guardians 2 at some point. I love Guardians 2. I think you and I are sort of in the same boat there.
Yeah. Hell, let's talk about it right now. Let's keep this going.
Yeah, let's just talk about every MCU film real quick. This is going to be our 38-hour podcast.
If anything, we could just, like, cut whatever we're about to talk about now into another episode.
We won't do all of that. We will eventually get to talking about the MCU. There's plenty to talk about in the MCU.
Is there ever? And there's nothing.
It's over a decade of movies at this point.
And shows.
Yeah. There's so much. We could talk about that for weeks, and we probably will, total.
Yeah, and like you were saying, if all the other Disney Plus shows are this quality, then we're in good hands. So far we are. I haven't completely caught up with Falcon and Winter Soldier yet, but it's just as good as WandaVision so far.
Really? I haven't started it yet.
I think so. I'm loving it. I haven't seen the past 2 episodes. I just haven't had the time because of work and stuff.
Yeah.
Hot take. It's what I wanted Civil War to be. It's no spoilers. I know because you haven't started. I don't think it's spoilers, but it does the same kind of like down and like deep character work that WandaVision did. It's also probably one of the more violent things in the MCU.
Interesting.
And it also incorporates a lot of lore from the Marvel Universe in really great ways, like WandaVision did. Yeah. So so far with these 2 shows, and unless Falcon and Winter Soldier totally shits the bed, which I don't think it will in the last episode, they're 2 for 2 with this, and there's a lot of care going into these shows, and the Loki show looks just as good.
Yeah. God, I can't wait for She-Hulk. Can't wait for She-Hulk.
God, I almost forgot how much they're doing. We got Loki coming out in the fall, I think.
There's like a
Marvel What If, which is the animated show.
Oh, that's going to be great. I'm a sucker for good animation, and Marvel needs some good animation.
They got that Disney money behind it, so...
Yeah. We should talk
the
about
Hawkeye show is in production right now. We got She-Hulk going into production soon. All kinds of stuff.
We should talk about some of the Marvel animated movies sometime, because there's some good parts in some of them. I don't think they're like complete trash. I think there's definitely like some quality among the animated Marvel movies. They don't hold a candle to the DC ones, but like
I think the only ones I like are the first Ultimate Avengers, and I thought the Planet Hulk animated movie was decent.
It is a decently faithful adaptation of the Planet Hulk storyline.
Unlike
Ragnarok! Oh, that movie makes me so angry. We've talked about it. We're going to talk about it in every podcast.
And
that should just be our final episode. we bring it up in every episode of the podcast, and then when we finally decide to quit, it will just be our scathing review of Thor Ragnarok, and then we'll just bounce.
You said that's a good idea. But prelude to that eventually, I said that you said that it's faithful to the comic, unlike Ragnarok. I'm not the kind of comic fan that pisses on a comic book movie if it's not just like the comics.
No.
I'm a movie guy first and foremost. What I care about is the movie, the story, what it does.
Yeah.
But Ragnarok is so egregious.
It is.
It not only completely craps the bed on the Ragnarok story, it craps the bed on the Hulk's most famous story
in like the past 2 decades.
It's two big steaming poos rolled into one.
Oh, okay. We can't keep talking about Ragnarok, especially in our WandaVision review. Oh, I know what it's time for. It's time for review. We gotta do a review.
Yes, I like that this is going to be a thing.
Yeah, where we take reviews that other people have had, just audience reviews, because critics talk too long. I mean, we're talking for an hour and a half about this. We can't review another person's hour and a half rant about these movies and shows. But from Rotten Tomatoes, 91% of critics liked this series, and 81% of audience liked this series.
Oh, that's a little lower than I would have thought. I guess probably because of the Ralph Boner thing.
Yeah, some of that, some of the loose ends that weren't really tied up. But here are some of the reviews that I found interesting from some of the audience reviews. This is from AI Space A, or maybe it's Al A. I can't tell if that's a lowercase L or an uppercase I. They say, "What a missed opportunity, many, especially with Quicksilver."
Term I hate.
I love the Scarlet Witch and was a huge Avengers fan when I was young. The show was just a letdown all over. I'm also tired of people who touch one Infinity Stone were made nearly as powerful as the guy wearing all 5. Woke TV at its worst. Monica Rambeau was made a token versus the cool character written in the book. She was also super annoying as a character. Also, you can torture a town, then get told they will never know what you gave up. Oh, poor Scarlet Witch. No wonder Iron Man wanted them all registered. 2 out of 5 stars.
God damn it.
That was basically every element that you said you didn't want to criticize the show on wrapped up into one criticism.
I want to just immediately go past this just because he had to pull out, I'm assuming it's a he, sorry.
I think it's Al. I think it's Al
but
A, so.
They had to pull out the whole woke card. Like, it's gotten to the point where any film, TV show, whatever, with a couple of vaginas in it is considered woke by
God, yeah.
fucking neckbeard pains in the asses.
I hate
just
it so much.
Shut up. Like, women exist. Yeah. They're gonna be in nerdy things. Just get used to it.
Worse, a black woman is in this series and plays a major role.
I like how they call I like how they don't explain how Monica's a token. Mm-hmm. A token in what way? Because she's the only prominent African-American character, or because she's a person of color character? Because Wu is also a person of color character in the show. Mm-hmm. So, what's your point? Where's the token thing you're talking about here?
Women exist. Black people exist. That's not even politics. They're real.
It's not even. No, you're.
I'm sorry.
That's where we're at. That's where we're at now. It's just like everything is political, even when it's not.
How dare you be? That's your That's the stance you're taking. Get over yourselves.
And I get being disappointed in the Ralph Boner thing. Yes, like, that is a legitimate grievance, but it's not such a grievance that it ruins everything in the show.
It's not a series ruiner.
No, like, and that's another thing. Allow me to digress even further.
Mm-hmm.
There's this mentality. Like, I don't know how much you come across it, but since I'm like the movie buff, I'm always seeing it. Like, people seem to hyper focus on one element of a movie that they don't like, and it completely ruins the whole thing. Like, I know taste is subjective, and like people's reactions to things are subjective, but like, I've seen so many comments over the years of like movies and stuff where people are like, but like this one part I didn't like, therefore movies suck. Mm-hmm. Like, and it's like, how can one? If I let little things in a movie I don't like ruin the movie for me, I wouldn't like anything. Yeah. You know, like,
unless it's like an egregious, like, moral moment where suddenly, like, hey, this movie's suddenly advocating for, like, racism or something. It's like, that one moment is not going to ruin, like a whole thing for me.
Like, a crappy special effect or, like, a goofy line of dialogue or, like, a plot contrivance isn't enough to ruin an entire experience.
I do think in series like this, where there's so much mystery build up, it gets exacerbated a bit because people are like, they have all these theories that they're holding to so strongly, and then when their theories turn out to be wrong, they get upset anyway. So if they turn out to be wrong, if they turn out to be wrong, and not just wrong, but wrong in a way that's like very much like, oh, you were totally wrong, you were so off the mark, haha, like the show's almost kind of like playfully shutting down their theory, then they're like, well, screw you, show. Because that kind of is what the show did, is like, oh yeah, you all thought this was going to be...
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
everybody, they knew what they were doing. By
of course they did. They totally knew.
So that's gonna piss off a few people.
Narratively, Ralph Boner still aids in the development of Wanda, so it's not a total loss as far as the actual show is concerned. No. It's just a loss. Future. Oh, my pet theory for the expansion of the universe wasn't true.
Yeah. Screw you, Al. We like the series and you don't.
Vaginas exist, people of color exist.
Sorry to break that to you. Step outside for once in a while. You Are Not M said, it's starting really good, and at end we got some kind of message that torture 3,000 plus people is somehow justifiable if you are sad.
Like
4 out of 5 stars, though.
See, it's like people hear a criticism and then just decide to parrot it without, like, thinking for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You could take the nuance of how it ended and be like, oh, well, I don't think her consequences were strong enough. Mm-hmm. But to say that the show said it was okay to torture a town full of people is just completely false.
Yeah.
Completely false.
You can say that it let her off too easy, perhaps, at least, like, morally, but, like, saying that it was totally okay, no. The show definitely shows, like, how reprehensible those actions were. Like, she was the villain for most of that series.
The show goes out of its way to make you sympathize with these people that are under the spell. So, I mean, you see a whole sequence where on the outskirts of town where they're glitching in and out and there's tears running down their face. Like, in no way does the show in any way advocate for what she did because she was in pain. Like, that's just... You can say it wasn't handled the best. I disagree, but it's fine. But shut up, you're wrong.
Alex M says, it's really just that, meh. Not much to nothing happens for 8 episodes, and then we learn that Wanda is a red witch that, like Hulk, she needs hide in a remote hut. Upgraded since Edward Norton times, and like Doctor Strange, she can educate herself while out of body. Will they join forces in the next movie to wield combined orange power? That's the question. 2.5 out of 5 stars.
I mean...
I don't...
So many of these reviews are just so cynical for the sake of being cynical.
Yeah. Not much happens for 8 episodes? Like, did you watch the first 8 episodes?
The entire show is incident after incident. Like, the only episode in the show that you can say nothing happens is the first episode, and even that's not true, because it ends with the creepy my husband's choking, stop it, stop it, stop it scene.
It's like this person just wanted to see how this connects to the next MCU property. It's like, I don't care about the actual story going on here. Just tell me how it ties into the next Doctor Strange movie.
And I didn't want to get into that, but that's a thing with the MCU. I'm not the entire fan base, of course. That's not what I'm saying. It's been around so long, some of the fan base seems to just have been trained to look forward to the clues and hints and ties to the next thing instead of enjoying the thing they have now that's happening.
Yeah.
You know, it's all about what's happening next and not the story that I'm watching now. Which it's really sad because it's a bad side effect of what Marvel has accomplished.
It's so weird to look back on because when they first started doing this, when they first started interconnecting a cinematic universe, it was like nobody's ever done something on like this on this scale before. This is insane. I can't believe all of these movies are tied together in one cohesive narrative. And now that they're doing it, it's like, yeah, there is definitely like the side effect of, crap, everything is tied together, so everybody's only going to talk about how it ties together, and even the movie is going to take a good portion of its time to just show how it's tied to the other movies.
I mean, I see it so much with some of the way fans talk about the newer movies and now the shows. Like, I'll cruise the Marvel Studios Reddit, which is a pretty good subreddit, pretty welcoming, not a lot of drama. But there'll be so many comments to be like, especially for WandaVision, because it's the most recent thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I thought it was pretty good, but like, it just didn't feel like it expanded the universe enough. And I'm like, that's not. Why is like I get that that's part of what the franchise is, but like that should only be the dessert after the main course.
Yeah.
Like if you're going into the next Marvel thing, just wanting to know what it's building up to, like that. Like
it's an inevitable. That's marketing.
Yeah,
that's what marketing is.
That's being invested in the brand over anything else.
Enjoy the stories as they are, and you can get hype about the next thing. That's great, but like it shouldn't be your main focus. Here's one that maybe scares me a little bit. John K. says, the first few episodes, especially the first, are painful. Stick with it, though, and by episode 5, you'll be wanting more. Season 2 is much better, as each episode is really good. 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Season 2.
Season 2 of WandaVision. I'm wondering if maybe he reviewed the wrong series here?
Did he time travel?
Or if he's like from a parallel universe where we got a season 2 of this limited series run.
Maybe he meant the second half of the season? But
I don't know.
God, I hate to sound... I don't... I'm going to be the jerk of the podcast, aren't I? I'm going to be the opinionated jerk of the podcast.
Maybe.
It's disappointing to me that so many people were so thrown off by the first 3 episodes just because it was different.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I get it being jarring if it's not what you're expecting, but like, people really were pissed off about it at first. It's only until Exposition Episode 4, which is, it's not a bad episode, but it's the weakest episode of the series from a storytelling perspective because it's literally just exposition mostly. Yeah, the first 3 episodes, people were like, I don't know about this. This sucks. Like, it's boring. I don't want this.
Which is weird, because those were, like, the most invested I was in the series, was the first 3. Like, when I didn't understand what was going on, that was where I felt like the series was at its best. Was when it was still building up all of its intrigue.
But I don't want to harp on it too much, because it's a vocal minority. The fans love it for the most part.
Yeah. 81% of audiences loved it. Adam A. says, it's so nice to watch an episode and be kept guessing throughout the week on the lead up to the next episode. 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think that's nice. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I think this show really did benefit from its weekly release. I think Adam there agrees with us, so good on you, Adam. Patrick G. This is our last one. Patrick G. said, it should be a long movie or more than 9 episodes long. First 5 episodes are too random, and I was very involved. 5 out of 5 stars. So they put 2 different criticisms in here and no positive notes, but they gave it a perfect score. So
okay. I mean, without the credits, it is a long movie.
Yeah.
I mean, just narratively, it's just one long story. So if you take out the beginning and ending credits, it's a big movie, basically.
I think people forgot what limited series are.
Yeah. I just think people are just so used to binging things now.
Yeah.
That when they have to wait a week, it throws them off because they can't just go from one episode to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. So then, like, did he say it felt like too fast or disjointed or something?
He just says first 5 episodes are too random, and I was very involved. It should
random how? They each follow up from the. I guess maybe the week wait is what gave him the impression that it's too random. I don't know.
I don't know either. Anyway, that covers all the reviews that I found interesting. Any final thoughts? I guess we kind of already did final thoughts.
Kind of did final thoughts. Yeah. Really great show. One of the best things in the MCU altogether, I think, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Tyler doesn't do number scores because he is afraid of math, but I'm going to give this series a 6 out of 9.
6 out of 9.
6 out of 9 robots. I'm going to keep changing the metric every time. Last time it was like 4 out of 5 bananas. This time it's 6 out of 9 robots.
Just because I want to feel included, I will give it 8.5 Ralph Boners out of 10 generic Dr. Tyler Haywood villains.
Yeah, I'm going to make mine 6.5 because I too like to use GameStop scores where we have like point systems for no reason. So 6.5 out of 9 robots. But this has been Tongue and Geek. Our weekly, our semi-weekly, our possibly weekly, we don't know, we've only done two of these so far, podcast where, again, 2 more white guys on the internet give their unrequested opinions on popular culture. Don't tell my mom.
Don't tell his mom.